Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Whiskey Me live tasting. It is the month of October 2024, and we're very excited to be joined by two great guests from this month's distilleries. We're going to be tasting Torabhaig from the Isle of Skye, and we've got Freud from Germany. Two really different drams, actually, but both very interesting in their own way. Thanks so much for joining us. We're really looking forward to doing this tasting with you. So we are going to kick off now with Torabhaig. In about 15-20 minutes, we're going to move on to Freud. So hold tight for that one. And joining me from Torabhaig, we've got Gordon. Hey, Gordon, how you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, very good. Thanks for joining in with us on this tasting tonight.
Looking forward to it.
Cool, man. Well, look, this is not the first time we've featured Torabhaig.
No.
We did Alt Glen. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Alt Glown.
Glown.
It's spelled Glen.
Glen, yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's the same word as Glen, right? It's just spelled differently as, yeah. I seem to remember this from last time. So we visited Torabhaig once before, and we love it. It's just a fantastic. The whiskey coming out of this distillery, I think, is really great, and I feel like we're almost getting some insight into what Talisker might have been like, 150, 200 years ago, right back at the start, because we're getting to see a new distillery on the Isle of Skye, which is just really interesting. So it'd probably be good before we talk about this whiskey specifically, Cnoc na Moine. I think I said that one right.
Yeah, Cnoc na Moine.
My Gallic's just not that good, to be honest with you.
Neither's my interested, so don't worry about it.
It'd probably be good before we get talking about that whiskey, to get a bit of an overview of Torabhaig again, just to understand the story so far, and what the sort of distillery is trying to achieve.
Yeah. So when we started distilling in 2017, the first new whiskey distillery on the Isle of Skye in 190 years or so. So obviously a bit of a gap and entering into a spot that's fairly well known for Talisker and not much else really. So it was quite an interesting spot. The whole project is essentially it's based around representing the Isle of Skye, and particularly the Sound of Slate, where the distillery is, in terms of whiskey profile, and the people there and the community there and the culture and the language, hence the use of Gaelic that everybody struggles to pronounce, but it's quite important to keep all that culture going and that community going and that language going. So yeah, the distillery was kind of preconceived prior to Mossburn Distillers acquiring the land for it and the permit to build a distillery there. And we've kind of stuck to what that plan was. So it's an old farmsteading that's been redone, reworked as a distillery. So the original building, all the pointing was done properly to reinvigorate it as the old farmsteading building. So it looks like it's been there for 200 years, but it's actually 7 years old now. So that was all kind of started in 2014, started producing spirit in 2017, and we are now on to our third bottling in what we're calling the Legacy series, which is essentially the journey through our whiskey making up until we release our 10-year-old in roughly 2028. So when you start a distillery, you know what the vision is, but you don't necessarily know exactly how it's going to turn out. So there's been little tweaks and little twists and turns made, and that's where our refinements, shall we say, that's what the Legacy series journey is going to take us on through until the 10-year-old in 2028. So we're on the third step of that. we're making a heavily peated whiskey, but we're looking at peat and phenols slightly differently from other people have previously. Usually people, when they're making heavily peated whiskey, they will buy their barley and then they'll try and retain all of the weight and power and strength of the phenols coming through from that, because they've had it in the barley in the first place. What we wanted to do was to create a really well balanced peated whiskey. So we've looked at our process and how we can adjust that slightly and do it slightly different from other people to create a really beautifully balanced peated whiskey that has lots and lots of elegance and lots of complexity and depth of flavour and nice character for those who do like peated whiskey, but also for those who don't necessarily think that they like peated whiskey as well. So, and I think we've managed to do that quite well. So what you get is a dram filled with peat smoke and those characteristics, but also lots of fruit, some nice sweetness to it, and a beautiful balance.
So what can you say about the process adjustments that are sort of designed to maybe tame the peat a little bit and bring about that elegance?
Yeah, so first step is quite a long fermentation. So we're running around a 90-hour fermentation. So with that, you'll bring about some more fruit aspects to it. And then in the distillation, it's a long, slow distillation. And then it's quite short foreshots, but then we cut quite high. So we are concentrating the more fragrant peat flavours coming through from it and retaining more of them, and maybe chipping away at the heavier, more punchy, if you like, peat flavours coming through. So we cut a little bit higher so that we're not taking all of them through to the final spirit, and therefore creating something that's got more guaiacol influence than creosol influence, which means that you're getting more of the ashy bonfire, gunflint fireworks than you are of the TCP and sticking plasters and all that kind of stuff coming through from it. So more of the fragrant aspect of peat smoke.
And do you think that is the sort of style of peat that will sort of become the typical style of the Isle of Skye going forward? I mean, it's sort of what Talisker do, right? So you're continuing that legacy, do you think?
Yeah, it's not as punchy as a lot of the big hitters from Islay, and it does have a little bit more elegance to it than maybe if we kept the distillation going and cut a lot lower. It would certainly be a lot punchier, because we're using very heavily peated barley in the whiskey, so it's around 80 ppm.
It is quite heavy then, isn't it? That's heavily peated.
Yeah, but we're also talking about not just the in-grain phenols, but also in the final spirit, because people quote these numbers and nobody really knows what they're talking about or what the influence is on it. So we're trying to open up that conversation as well, and get people thinking about not just the base ingredient, but the process through it and how that all comes through in the actual flavour of the whiskey.
Nice. Well, we're getting some nice comments coming through. Another excellent Torabhaig. And I mean, it is just very befitting of the weather right now. We're not quite in. I mean, you know, if you like peat, then perhaps you want to go sort of full Islay creosote when it gets closer to winter. But right now, the autumnal peat is something like this, I would say, where it's elegant and fruity, but also smoky.
Yeah, it's definitely got that smoke coming through from it, but I love the fruit coming through with this and the balance that gives it, and the slight sweetness to the spirit as well, which is it makes it really, really approachable. And this dram in particular is probably the most quaffable of the lot that we've had so far. This it's quite easy to get through a couple of drams of this, no problem at all.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't stick around too long. It's got the smoke there, but it's not. You know, you're not in danger of waking up and still tasting it in the morning. I don't think, like you are with some. Can we ask the percentage of smoked malt in this whiskey? So you said 80 ppm, but is that being mixed with unpeated as well?
So that's the average of
Right.
the malted barley that we get. So it's on average for this one 79.4 ppm.
Yeah. Because what my understanding of it is that you'll get your peated malt delivered, and or this may even happen prior to delivery. They don't really have any control over how much peat goes into it when they're peating it. Like it's smoke, right? You can't kind of like, you know, oh, we're going to put 3 liters of smoke into this thing. So they measure it when it comes out, and then what they do is they adjust it with unpeated malt to get it to the right ppm.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Cnoc and Moine. What makes this whiskey different? What's going on here?
So this is our first foray into using casks other than ex-bourbon or refill whiskey casks. So in this one, it's the first time that we have brought in a little bit of sherry cask influence on the whiskey. It's still, so you can see that coming through in the colour of the whiskey there. This is a 5-year-old whiskey, no colouring added to it. But we're using a light touch of sherry casked whiskey in this. So this is roughly 92% ex-bourbon and refill whiskey casks, and then the other 8% is between Oloroso sherry, which makes up about 6% of the blend, and then a tiny touch of Pedro Jimenez sherry cask matured whiskey as well. So it's all fully matured in those casks and then blended together rather than being finished or anything like that. And that sherry just gives it a lovely unctuousness. It's not too much to overwhelm the peat smoke and the flavours coming through from the peated barley that we're using. It just gives it a nice little zhuzh to it.
It's very tasty. I mean, I think you just get that hint of sherry come through in the finish. You know, it's sweet and peaty up front, and then in the finish you just start to get a bit of like apricot or peach or dried peach or something like that. You know, come through in the finish there.
Yeah, for me, there's a bit of maybe kind of orange peel or maybe even candied orange coming through on it as well. It's got that kind of slight hint of Christmas cakey character, but not overwhelming the peat smoke. You're still getting all the bonfires and some of the firework and the gunflint still coming through there as well.
Yeah. Right, we're getting a lot of tasting notes come through. In this one, I think was one of the best peated whiskies I've had.
High praise.
And I'm not into peated.
That makes more sense then.
Yeah, just had a drop of water. I've got extra peat as it's straight off the hillside here. Yeah. Preferred to the Alt Glen. What ppm is in this one? I think we've probably covered. Well, are you asking ppm in the liquid? Maybe is that the question? I don't know.
Yeah. In the liquid, slightly higher ppm than the Alt Glen. So this is up at 19.7, whereas I think the Alt Glen was, now you're testing me, 17.7.
Pretty close though.
Yeah.
And then we're also getting ppm. This is a lot of ppm questions. I think probably my moustache is new since last month, so you know there's going to be a lot of chatter about that. It's just inevitable. We will test the ABV of my moustache afterwards. What we got here then? Will Torabhaig be bottling a 10-year-old statement when the time comes? Yes, I mean you did mention that earlier, didn't you?
That is the current plan that I have heard. So yes, but things change in the world. But I would expect us to do a 10-year-old age statement as our kind of core bottling when it comes of age. That is the current plan. I think I'm allowed to tell people that. So
yeah, I mean. It sort of feels like 10-year-old is just a coming of age of any new distillery, right? So, you know, do the math. You know, it's when the distillery is 10 years old, it's likely there will be a 10-year-old whiskey coming out. It seems like a missed opportunity if you don't do that, right?
Yeah, we're not going to hold off a year and do an 11-year-old just to be different. Yeah.
Yeah, start going down the Kregeliki route of doing like prime numbers or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, not for us. Get to 10, pop a double-digit number on it, and
Yeah, exactly. That's what you need. Right. Cool. There's just loads of questions about moustaches now, so we're going to leave that. What else to say? I think that's it. I mean, I think it's an absolutely banging dram. It's just perfect for when, you know, these evenings are getting dark now, and it's got that little bit of fruit, got that little bit of smoke. It is a perfectly autumnal whiskey, I think. And I just can't wait to see what else, you know, we get from this distillery, because
there'll be some other bits coming out in the, you know, each of these legacy series whiskies is designed to be in market for around a year, so they're limited, but they're not limited. So we'll have another one coming out around April, probably May time, 2025, and then going forward there'll also be some journeyman's drams coming out. So at the distillery, what we've done slightly differently as well is that we hired 9 locals when we were setting up the distillery to be brewer distillers, apprentice brewer distillers at the distillery. They're overseen by people who have lots of industry experience, but they are going through their training program and learning on the job. So what we do is each year 2 of them get a couple of weeks to make whatever they want at the distillery, and therefore going forwards we will have some things that are possibly not very Torabhaig if we like. Some of them have gone really heavily peated, like octomore levels of peat. Some of them have gone completely unpeated, which will be a little bit trickier for the marketing team to get around. But it's quite interesting seeing what they've done and what they have kept from the original recipe. And the things that they've all kept are long fermentation time and quite slow distillation. And most of them have kept quite a high cut point in their distillation as well. So it'll be really interesting. Lots of very fun stuff coming out. There's lots of really interesting casks, some of them using chocolate malt and things like that as well, and some heritage varietals of barley as well. So there'll be some interesting things coming out, but the legacy series, kind of 1 a year up until 2028, and then we'll come out with the 10-year-old. So plenty to look out for.
Great. Cool. Do you want to hang around for a little bit and hear a little bit about Freud? All right, cool.
Absolutely.
We're going to introduce Andy. Hey, Andy, how you doing?
Hi, great to be with you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. So this is fantastic. You are the CEO of the Ziegler distillery over in Germany.
Yeah, that's true. So it's quite different. It was very interesting, Gordon, to listen to your conversation and learn a lot about peated whiskey, because I know who of you guys has ever tasted Freud, but we are, I would say, roughly on the contrary to be peated. So we're rather on the let's say fruity end, but there's a very easy reason for that, which I think touch upon in a minute. But yes, so Ziegler, for you guys, basically to give a bit of a background information. So Ziegler's been around for almost 160 years. So we are precisely in our 159th year of doing business and essentially distilling fruit brandies. So this is where we are coming from. Fruit brandy is a quite local thing in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, parts of Italy, basically northern Italy, parts of France. We are in the business since quite a while, I'd say. And as others say about Ziegler, basically we tend to be the most legendary distillery in Germany. Maybe not the oldest, but what we do and this is also where our outstanding, let's say, image is coming from in terms of fruit brandies. And some years ago, as funny enough, the distillery started as a brewery back in the day, so in the 19th century. There was always a link to whiskey, obviously, from an ingredient perspective. So not only fruits, also malt. So the guys took on the job of producing whiskey in different.
So they were producing beer back in the day.
They were producing beer up to the end of the 19th century, basically. So stopped it since quite a while. Essentially we started to produce whiskey. It started to go into whiskey roughly like 14, 15 years ago. And there was a lot of experimentation and a lot of things trying out. And then this, actually quite some years ago, lucky enough, we started to collect different casks. So if it's, we have, Chateau de Cam casks coming from France. We even have Freud casks here. So we have a lot of, like fruit brandy, ex-fruit brandy casks, etc. Just to, try out, because as we cultivate fruit brandies basically, and we have two barrel aged ones, which is Old Apple and Old Plum. Yeah. And Old Plum essentially is next to the wild cherry one, which is cultivated in steel tank, one of our most like legendary and signature products. We then started experimenting, and then my initial idea about creating Freud as a brand, as you especially from an appearance point of view, is that we have a lot of history, obviously, in distilling. Yeah, so like the art of distilling is essential and is our core, but not necessarily in whiskey. We said, okay, we don't want to copy, anyone or try to pretend a 160-year-old heritage in that field. Yeah, so why don't start a contemporary brand? Yeah. Which I think, as the packaging design in the background shows already, it's not your traditional whiskey. It's not your traditional whiskey brand, nor is
it looks very different to all of your like eau de vie and fruit brandy branding as well.
Yeah, especially from a brand perspective. So the idea was really to say, okay, Ziegler is the umbrella brand. Obviously, it's the name of the distillery, but it's also like our core in terms of fruit brandies. But next to it, we wanted to build something which we can, let's say, behave a bit different, which looks a bit different, which also attracts a different audience. And Freud, and this is the distillery is in Germany. Obviously, I'm just here in the distillery right at the Main River. But me myself, I'm from Vienna, so there was always a joke around that's the reason why Freud is called Freud, but it's obviously not. It's because our hometown here is called Freudenberg. So the nice short form basically that for me fits very well in the world of New World whiskey. So
it may well sell well in Austria as well, right?
Yeah, it brings you on the couch, so to say.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but and the essence of the product is really that we basically let it. It matures in Old Plum cask. So this Old Plum cask, which is in German Alte Zwetschge, which is one of our signature products, basically is the home for quite some years before we bottle it, and this gives it this, as you pointed out, like let's say, I would say fruitier and definitely quite distinctive flavor.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and we're already getting some tasting notes come through. I mean, it is a completely different whiskey to Torabhaig. For me, it's those, and it'd be interesting. I've not tried any of your fruit brandies or your eau de vie, but there's obviously something from that plum cask that's really shining through there, because it's that dark stone fruit damsons. And, again, it's just a brilliant autumnal dram as we're sort of thinking about those kind of fruit flavors.
That's definitely a point. And I think the other thing that stands out is the color, as it's, I think it has a very, as I can see in the glass here, maybe for you guys,
nice glass.
it has I think it's very rich and deep in color, which essentially comes down to the chestnut cask. So we are the local wood here is chestnut. Yeah. So we have since ages used chestnut for fruit brandies, as well as oak. So basically both cask types. But Freud is essentially held over a year in fresh chestnut, or almost always fresh chestnut, and then it's in ex-bourbon. before it then basically has the later stage in the ex-old plum, which then is out of chestnut in many cases, or oak.
So the initial maturation in chestnut, is that virgin chestnut casks?
It's yes, in the majority of the cases it's virgin chestnut, because it just gives it like has a quite nice impact on the color as well, and also on the taste profile, and then we round it off with the old plum, which, as you say, definitely gives it this bit fruitier, bit like this deep stone fruit, but also some floral notes, and
floral for sure as well. Yeah, absolutely.
It is definitely this floral.
Yeah. So this is going in old plum casks. Are there other fruit brandies that you're making that are matured in casks that may in the future lend those casks to future Freud whiskey releases?
That's a good point. We have to think about it. No, but I mean, of course, we thought about it, to be honest. Yeah, and we have old apple, for instance. Apple has an even stronger and even much more intense taste profile. The old apple fruit brandy, which is more in the direction of Calvados almost. Yeah, so there are certainly things we are experimenting with always with, and our team is on it. What we started 2 years ago is the first 10-year-old, so Freud X as we call it, because it has this like Roman X on the chest, basically on the bottle. And so this follows the same taste profile. This is also held in the same cask. But for the future, our idea was really to establish a solid groundwork in terms of like a community, and we are new in the New World whiskey community in this way. So we don't pretend to be there for quite some time. So and also we want to find give people the chance to experience a drink. Funny enough, it works especially with those, I think, more fruity and a bit sweeter notes. It works neat very well, but also as a mixer, which is quite cool, because we did a lot of Freud sours, for instance, because we have some liqueur stuff which can also then nicely integrate. So our own product range, you can do quite some nice variations, and this is where we just don't want to rush into too many variations too quickly.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. What can you say about the German whiskey consumer? What is the market like at the moment? And maybe Austria as well, if you like.
I would say it's a funny market in its own, because on the one hand, it's there's definitely the tradition and the roots. Whiskey can't be compared to like traditional whiskey nations, I'd say. However, there is a huge number of distilleries popping up just for doing whiskey, basically in the last, I would say, 10 years. So they really mushroomed in a way, because so kind of the topic grow, which I think is a very positive thing. But as you can imagine, if you have a lot of distilleries that started quite early, also the whiskey is quite young, and so I think it kind of it needs some. Actually, there's no shortcut in whiskey, as we always say, right? This is also why we keep and we don't have an aging statement on the bottle, but the whiskey will never be younger than 5 to 6 years old, just because we feel that we need this time, we need to give it this time to really kind of have the end result we try to achieve. And I think this is at the moment, I think it gets, let's say, it changes every year on a positive end, on a quality end, but it's a very natural development, so that's nobody's to blame for that, but you need to give it, I think you need to be patient, you need to give it time, and you shouldn't release your things too early.
And then I'm interested about your liqueurs and eau de vie as well. So I'm guessing it's a slightly different demographic that are drinking that compared to the whiskey, or do you see some crossover there?
Yes, definitely. So we are definitely not in the Generation Z with fruit brandies. which is,
I didn't want to make assumptions, but
not a brand topic, but more of a category topic, as you can imagine. No, joke aside. So basically, it's yes, of course, it's a different demographic. It's also a different price point, to be honest, right? So kind of our fruit brandies, with so like the intake of fruit in a 0.5 cl bottle or liter bottle is between 10 and 15 kilos of pure fruit without stone. And as you can imagine, when you mash something like wild cherry, and you have to have like 11 kilos per bottle, and the whole thing is also, we kept it in steel tank, but it stays there for at least 5 years. So, and then you have 10, 12 different fruit. So kind of, there's a lot of, it's also not a quick win. There's also no shortcut. So we know what we're talking about in terms of, being patient and making sure people that the product really gets the time it needs. So there's certainly a different demographic coming from that end, because the price point also is different. And I think it just opens up a lot, because fruit brandies are 100% digestive. And of course, there are ways to mix it where you can, like add a bit here and a bit there, but it's not really intended to be mixed. And if it would be mixed, it would not make sense to essentially mix it too much with Ziegler, because we are, like, I would say the pinnacle in terms of quality. So it's really, as you maybe would not mix a 20-year-old whiskey or anything, right? So having said that, I think the beauty of Freud is that, you have this, you can play both sides, and not that it's mixed, but you know what I mean. So basically, it works well in both directions, and this is super interesting for us, because we can experiment a lot, and we can, we can have barkeepers play around and try to also establish a bit of a community around the product.
And are you using the same distilling equipment and everything that you use with the fruit brandies for the whiskey?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's I always find that quite interesting, because it's really making whiskey as if you're making a fruit eau de vie from malted barley, right? It's the same kind of treatment.
It's from the technical process, it's essentially identical. The biggest point of differentiation really is let's say how the quality outcome is determined. What I mean by that, with fruit brandy, 80% of the quality is the fruit. Full stop.
Right.
So if you have to know your skills, and you have to be skillful to kind of get the best out of it, obviously, right? And you have to have the right amount of fruit, and you need to store it for the right time, and don't take it out too early, etc. But at the end of the day, really, the fruit quality determines a lot, and you can influence just a smaller part. With whiskey, I'd say it's the other way around, right? It's really about giving it the time, going for the right cask, how many years in which type of wood, etc. So the whole work starts after you basically completed the distilling process. Right. Yeah, with the fruit brandy, you can wait, but you can't really influence it a lot, because you normally keep it in, it's clear brandies in most cases, so you keep it in steel tank, and it sits there for the right amount of time.
5 years in steel tank as well. That is just incredible.
Yes, yeah. So 3 years at least for the majority of the fruit, and for the wild cherry, which is, let's say, our signature, it's at least 5 years. Yeah. So
it's strange, because with a barrel, and you say 5 years, and you're like, well, yeah, the barrel's giving it flavor, the steel tank, it doesn't sound on the sort of face of it that it's going to give it any flavor. But I've tried spirits before that have had a lot of time in steel and in glass, and it is remarkable how they change over that time period.
Yeah, you don't really expect that, because there's definitely a different oxidation process than in barrel. But it happens a lot. Yeah. So, and a side fact, given our age and given also our history, we still have something which we call the old cellar, which is really something like a cellar where they kept ice blocks out of the river back in the days. And we have brandies there in, as you said, like those glass balloons that date back. The oldest turned 100 this year. So it's really from the 1920s. And we have, I would say, around 80 to 100 of those glass balloons, where we keep like very special, let's say special releases, or when the quality of the fruit in that year is specifically high. And lucky enough, it has not been finished yet. So, but whenever you're around, or any one of you guys out
that was
there,
my next question.
happy visiting us, and we do barrel tasting of Freud, and can also find
right. I was just over in Berlin last week.
I was there as well, obviously.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. That's a date. I mean, that sounds fascinating. I'm gonna come see you.
Because sorry to interrupt, but there was one question. So it's all double distilling, of course.
Yeah, you saw that, did you? Yeah. So all double distillation, and that's whiskey and for the eau de vie as well, I assume. Yeah. Cool. Well, look, that's fascinating. Thank you both for a fascinating talk. Yeah, cheers. I need to pour some more actually. But seriously, I think this has been one of my favorite months of whiskey for a little while, actually. Both of them seem to fit the season perfectly, but in very different ways. And both of them really delicious. And I think the story behind both brands and the liquid you're both making is amazing. So cheers.
Thanks, Tristan. Thanks for inviting us, or thanks for inviting me. And great opportunity to talk about Freud a little bit.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your questions this evening, and we'll see you next month.